Today, we're going to be exploring one of the most powerful ideas in all of science, the theory of evolution by natural selection. Of all the ideas humans have ever had, very few have genuinely changed how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Evolution is one of them. It's elegant, powerful, and once you understand it, you can't unsee it. So let's go back to where it all began. For centuries, naturalists looked at the living world and puzzled over some big questions. Why are there so many kinds of creatures? Why do organisms show these nested patterns of similarity? Species within genera, genera within families. And what about fossils? Those preserved remains of creatures that don't exist anymore. Why did extinct species often look like living ones, but with these distinct differences? For a long time, the prevailing view was simple. Species were fixed, created once, unchanging. But some curious minds started to wonder, what if that just wasn't true? One of these minds belonged to a French naturalist named Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. In 1809, Lamarck released Philosophie zoologique and proposed something radical for his time, that species weren't fixed, that they could transform over generations. Unfortunately, his mechanism was wrong though. He thought that animals could acquire traits during their lifetime and pass them to their offspring. His classic example, giraffes stretching their necks to reach high foliage and then passing these longer necks to their offspring. We now know this doesn't work. Traits you acquire during your lifetime aren't encoded in your DNA and cannot be inherited. But here's why Lamarck mattered. He fundamentally shifted the conversation from whether species change to how they change, and that was huge. In December 1831, a 22-year-old Englishman named Charles Darwin boarded a ship called the HMS Beagle. He wasn't famous, he wasn't even sure what he wanted to do with his life, but he was intensely curious, and he paid close attention. For nearly 5 years, Darwin sailed around the world as the ship's naturalist, which gave him unprecedented access to the natural world across the southern hemisphere. He climbed mountains in South America, explored coral reefs, and collected thousands of specimens, beetles, rocks, plants, bones. And everywhere he went, he took meticulous notes. In the Pampas region of Argentina, he unearthed fossils of extinct megafauna, giant creatures like Megatherium, a ground sloth the size of an elephant, and Glyptodon, an armoured mammal that looked remarkably similar to modern-day armadillos. The anatomical similarities between these extinct giants and living South American animals was striking. Then, on the Galapagos Islands, a volcanic archipelago 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador, Darwin noticed something strange. The mockingbirds looked different from island to island, so did the finches and the giant tortoises. Each island had its own distinct variety, with shell shapes that matched their specific environment. The vice-governor even told Darwin he could identify which island a tortoise came from just by looking at its shell. Darwin didn't understand what this meant, but he felt it, that nagging sense that something profound was hiding in plain sight. Two years after returning to England, in September 1838, Darwin read an essay by Thomas Malthus about population growth. Malthus had demonstrated something mathematically. Populations grow geometrically, while food resources grow arithmetically. In other words, population growth inevitably outstrips resources. Not everyone can survive, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Darwin realised if organisms produce way more offspring than can possibly survive, then there's competition, a struggle for existence. And if individuals vary even just slightly, some of them will have traits that help them survive and reproduce better than others. those individuals pass their advantageous traits to the next generation. Over time, generation after generation, these helpful traits become more common in the population. This was natural selection. No guiding hand of fate, just variation, inheritance, and differential reproductive success playing out over time. Darwin had found his mechanism. But here's the thing, Darwin didn't rush to publish. He knew that this idea was revolutionary and controversial, maybe even dangerous for Victorian England. So he spent the next 20 years quietly, methodically gathering evidence. He bred domestic pigeons, documenting how artificial selection could produce dramatic changes in just a few generations. He spent 8 years dissecting and classifying barnacles to understand variation and species boundaries. He studied fossils, plant reproduction, seed dispersal. He corresponded with naturalists all over the world. By the mid-1850s, Darwin had built an absolutely airtight case, supported by evidence from paleontology, biogeography, comparative anatomy, embryology, and breeding experiments. And still, he hesitated to publish. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, another naturalist was having his own breakthrough. His name was Alfred Russel Wallace. Wallace had been exploring the jungles of Malaysia and Indonesia for years, studying wildlife in some of the most remote places on Earth. In February 1858, while recovering from a malarial fever in Ternate, Wallace recalled that same essay that Darwin had read by Malthus just 20 years earlier. Suddenly, the same insight hit him. This struggle for existence drives species to change through differential survival and reproduction. Excited, Wallace wrote up his idea in a 4,000-word essay and mailed it to someone he admired and had corresponded with occasionally, Charles Darwin. When Darwin opened that letter in June 1858, his heart sank. Wallace had independently discovered natural selection. Darwin thought he had been scooped. Darwin consulted his colleagues, geologist Charles Lyell and botanist Joseph Hooker, and they came up with a fair solution. They arranged to present both men's work simultaneously at the Linnean Society in London. On July 1, 1858, 3 papers were read: Darwin's unpublished 1844 essay, an 1857 letter from Darwin to botanist Asa Gray outlining his theory, and Wallace's brand new 1858 paper. This established that Darwin had developed the idea first, but it gave Wallace full credit for his independent discovery. A strangely honourable act for Victorian scientists. And here's what's remarkable. Both men remained respectful colleagues. Wallace even later acknowledged that Darwin deserved primary credit because of his earlier work and comprehensive evidence. But the independent discovery mattered scientifically. It proved that natural selection wasn't just Darwin's personal quirk. It was a logical conclusion from observable patterns in nature, strong enough to be discovered multiple times through different lenses. It gave the idea scientific legitimacy. On November 24, 1859, publisher John Murray released 1,250 copies of On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Every single copy sold on the first day. Darwin's book presented a systematic argument backed by evidence from multiple fields. The geological record showed species appearing and disappearing across vast timescales. Comparative anatomy revealed homologous structures, the same bones arranged differently in human arms, bat wings, and whale flippers, suggesting common ancestry. Embryology showed that diverse species share remarkably similar early developmental stages before diverging. Biogeography explained why oceanic islands had unique species closely related to, but distinct from mainland forms. And artificial selection demonstrated that selective pressure could produce substantial changes in morphology. Darwin's conclusion was inescapable. All species descended from common ancestors through a branching process like a great tree of life, driven by natural selection, operating over immense geological time. So that's the story of how evolution by natural selection entered science. It wasn't one eureka moment. It was decades of careful observation, comparative analysis, and synthesis across multiple disciplines. It emerged from fossil beds in Argentina and living populations on remote Pacific islands, from two naturalists working independently, separated by oceans, who recognized the same fundamental patterns in nature. What they gave us was more than just an explanation for why there are so many different species. They gave us a way to understand life itself, not as something fixed and unchanging, but as something dynamic, interconnected, and constantly unfolding. Thank you for watching. See you next time.